The champagne glass didn't shatter when it slipped from Clara's hand. It hit the marble floor, rolled once, and stopped. No one moved. 25 years of marriage, distilled into a single quiet sound that refused to become chaos. The guests laughed again softly at first, then louder because that's what people do when they sense something is wrong but don't understand it yet. The string quartet resumed. A waiter stepped forward, unsure, then stepped back. Adrian Vale didn't look at the glass. He looked at his wife. Clara was still smiling. That same smile she had perfected over decades, polished, practiced, untouchable. The kind that convinced rooms full of people that everything was exactly as it should be, even when it wasn't. Across the room, Evan stood near the bar, fingers wrapped around a drink he hadn't touched. He watched his mother the way someone watches a storm they've learned not to run from because running never helped. Maya stood beside Clara, radiant in white silk, her hand resting lightly on the stack of documents on the table. Documents that would transfer control of the Vale Group. "Tonight, shall we?" Clara said, her voice smooth, carrying just enough warmth to feel maternal and just enough distance to feel final. The lawyer nodded. Pens were placed. Chairs shifted. And then, Adrian finally moved. He stepped forward, slow, measured. No anger. No hesitation. He picked up his glass, raised it slightly. "I've signed everything you asked for," he said. A pause. Not dramatic, not loud. Just long enough for something invisible to tighten in the air. Then he added, "Now, it's my turn. If this moment made you feel like something bigger is about to unfold, stay with this story. You're going to want to see how far silence can go." No one understood what Adrian meant. That was the point. The room exhaled in small, uncertain breaths. A few guests smiled politely, assuming it was a toast, some cryptic, sentimental line meant to mark the moment. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Clara's fingers tightened, almost imperceptibly, around the stem of her glass. Only one person didn't look confused. Evan. He didn't move from the bar, didn't step forward, didn't ask questions, because questions had never given him answers in this house. They had only taught him how to wait. He had been waiting since he was 8 years old. That was the first time he noticed the difference. Maya had spilled juice on the living room carpet, bright red, impossible to hide. Clara had walked in, saw the stain, and then looked at Evan. "Why weren't you watching her?" she asked. "Not what happened. Not are you okay?" Just blame. Redirected, clean, effortless. Evan remembered standing there, small hands clenched, trying to understand a rule no one had explained to him yet. In this house, responsibility didn't follow action. It followed expectation, and expectation had already chosen him. By 16, he was working weekends at the warehouse Vale Group's oldest facility. Heavy steel, long hours, men twice his age who didn't care whose son he was. He liked it there, not because it was easy, but because it was honest. If something broke, you fixed it. If you made a mistake, it was yours. No one smiled while taking something from you. Inside the house, things were different. Maya got the new car. Maya got the private tutors. Maya got introductions to investors, dinners with partners, the kind of attention that quietly builds a future. Evan got silence, and explanations that never quite explained anything. "Your brother is strong," Clara would say to guests. "He doesn't need the same support." Evan learned not to argue. He learned something more useful. He learned to watch, to notice how documents moved across tables, how signatures appeared, how his father said very little, but never signed anything immediately. Adrian didn't resist, but he didn't rush either. Back in the present, Evan set his glass down, still untouched. Across the room, Maya laughed softly as the lawyer prepared the papers. Clara leaned in, whispering something that made her daughter smile wider. They thought this was the end of something. Evan knew better. He had seen that look in his father's eyes before. Not often, but enough to recognize it. The look of a man who had already made his decision, long before anyone else realized there was one to make. If you've ever been the one who stayed quiet while everything was taken from you, you already know silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's preparation. The pen hovered above the paper, but Adrian didn't lower it. Not yet. The room leaned forward in invisible anticipation, the kind that comes when money is about to change hands, when power is about to shift, when people believe they are witnessing an ending. Adrian had learned something about endings. They rarely look like the truth. 10 years earlier, a hospital room, white walls, low light, the quiet hum of machines that measured things no one could control. Clara stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, voice lowered but urgent. "We don't have time," she said. "He's asking questions." Adrian wasn't supposed to hear that. But he did. Not the whole conversation, just fragments. Just enough to understand that something existed beyond what was being said inside their home. Something that had been hidden. He didn't confront her. He didn't ask who she was talking to, because Adrian Vale had built his entire life on one principle. If something doesn't make sense, don't interrupt it. Watch it. Weeks later, the documents appeared. Restructuring papers. Small changes, Clara said. Tax efficiency, future planning, nothing urgent. Just sign here, she smiled. Adrian looked at the pages. Then he looked at her. Then he did something that irritated Clara more than any argument ever could. He didn't refuse. He simply said, "I'll review them." Days turned into weeks. Clara reminded him gently at first, then with sharper edges. "Adrian, this is important. Adrian, the timing matters. Adrian, why are you delaying this?" He always answered the same way. "I'm not delaying. I'm understanding." Understanding took time. It meant calling people quietly, reading clauses twice, noticing what wasn't written as much as what was. And eventually, it meant realizing something that didn't fit. The ownership structure Clara proposed didn't just shift control. It moved assets, slowly, strategically, away from him, back in the present, the same pen, the same calm hand. Clara watched him now, her smile steady but her eyes sharper. "Adrian," she said softly, "everyone is waiting." He nodded. Of course they were. People always wait, when they think they're about to receive something. He lowered the pen, signed, one page, then another. No hesitation, no visible resistance. The lawyer collected the documents, satisfied. Clara exhaled, barely noticeable, but real. Maya reached for her mother's hand, excitement flickering across her face. To them, it was done. Adrian placed the pen back on the table, carefully, exactly where it had been. "You should always let people believe they've won," he said quietly. No one asked what he meant, because no one thought it applied to them. But Evan heard it, and for the first time that night, he allowed himself to breathe differently. Not relief, not hope, something colder. Recognition, because he understood now. His father hadn't just been silent all these years. He had been waiting for the moment when silence would matter most. Some truths don't explode when they surface. They settle, slowly, like dust in a room no one has entered for years. Adrian had been living with one of those truths for a decade. It didn't begin with a confession. It began with a photograph, a charity gala. 10 years ago, Clara in a dark blue dress, standing near the edge of a crowded ballroom. Elegant, composed, untouchable, except she wasn't alone. There was a man beside her, just slightly too close, his hand resting at the small of her back, not casually, but familiarly. Too familiar for coincidence, too subtle for accusation. Adrian had seen it while flipping through a magazine feature the following week, a 2-page spread about donors and partnerships. He hadn't reacted. He had simply turned the page, because reacting would have forced a question, and questions demand answers. Adrian preferred evidence. The name came later, through a contact, quietly asked, quietly answered. Marcus Hale, investor, consultant, a man who had intersected with Clara's schedule more times than business alone could justify. Still, Adrian said nothing, not to Clara, not to anyone, because suspicion is not proof. And Adrian didn't build his life on suspicion. The proof came a year later. A routine file, one that wasn't meant for him. A school enrollment form. Mayas. There was a mistake in the blood type section. A small one. Easy to overlook. Unless you knew. It didn't match either parent. Adrian didn't confront Clara that night. Or the next. Or the next. He waited. Then he ordered a test. Private. Quiet. Untraceable. The results came back in a sealed envelope. He opened it alone. Read it once. Then again. No emotion. No visible reaction. Just confirmation. Maya was not his daughter. Downstairs, Clara was laughing at something on television. The sound drifted up the staircase, light and effortless, like nothing in the world had shifted. But something had. Not loudly. Not visibly. But permanently. Adrian folded the paper, placed it back into the envelope, locked it away, and then he did something that would define the next 10 years of his life. He chose silence, not out of weakness, not out of fear, but because in that moment, Adrian understood something most people never do. Confrontation ends a story. Silence lets it continue. And if a story continues long enough, people reveal everything. Back in the present, Clara was smiling again, speaking with the lawyer, her voice smooth, confident, controlled. Maya stood beside her unaware, untouched by the truth that had shaped every decision her father had made since she was 11. Across the room, Evan watched his father, and for the first time, he didn't see a man who had failed to act. He saw a man who had chosen when to act. Some people shout when they discover betrayal. Others walk away. But the most dangerous ones? They say nothing and start building a future where the truth will land exactly where it hurts the most. Revenge, when it's loud, burns fast, but when it's silent, it becomes architecture. Adrian didn't decide to destroy Clara that night. He decided to outlast her. The first move was invisible. Not a confrontation, not a withdrawal. A reclassification. 3 months after the DNA results, Adrian created a holding structure quietly, legally, precisely. A second company, then a third. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious, just layers. Each one owning a piece of something the original company used every day: licenses, supplier contracts, equipment leases, intellectual property. The heart was no longer where it appeared to be. Clara didn't notice, because from the outside, everything still looked the same. The Veil Group grew, revenue increased, partnerships expanded, and Clara became more confident. Confidence is dangerous when it isn't challenged. It starts to believe it earned everything. Adrian let her believe that. He let her manage the accounts, let her lead meetings, let her speak for the company in rooms that used to belong to him. He stepped back, just enough, not absent, just less visible. At home, nothing changed. Clara still smiled the same way, still corrected Evan in front of guests, still praised Maya with a softness she had never shown her son. Evan noticed. Of course he did. He noticed the way his mother never used his name when introducing him. "This is my son," she would say. Then turn, "And this is Maya, our future." Our future, never his. One night, when Evan was 19, he found Adrian in the office alone, reviewing documents long after midnight. "Why don't you ever say anything?" Evan asked. No anger, no accusation, just quiet confusion. Adrian didn't look up immediately. He finished reading the page, signed something, closed the folder. Then he said, "Because saying something ends it too early." Evan frowned. "Ends what?" Adrian finally met his eyes. "The part where they show you who they really are." Evan didn't understand then. Not fully, but he remembered it. Years passed. Clara pushed harder. More control, more access, more signatures. And Adrian? He gave her exactly what she asked for, but never everything she thought she was getting. Every contract she celebrated had a counterpart she never saw. Every account she managed had a shadow she didn't control. Every victory she claimed moved her closer to something she didn't even know existed. Back in the present, the documents were signed. The room was relaxed again. Wine was being poured, laughter returning. Clara leaned toward Maya, whispering something that made her smile. They thought it was over. Adrian watched them for a moment. Not with anger, not even with resentment. Just completion. Because what Clara had been building for 10 years was never hers to take. And what Adrian had been building in silence was finally ready to be seen. Hatred would have been easier, cleaner, simpler. But Adrian never hated Maya. That was the part no one would understand. Not Clara. Not the guests. Not even Evan. At first. Because hatred creates noise, and Adrian had built everything on silence. Maya was 11 the day he learned the truth. Old enough to laugh at the dinner table. Young enough to still believe her father hung the world in place. She had run into his study that afternoon, holding a school project, something about family trees. "Dad, look, I did ours," she said. Branches drawn in colored pencil. Names written carefully. At the top, Adrian and Clara. Below, Evan and Maya. Simple. Complete. Wrong. Adrian had looked at the paper longer than necessary. Not because he didn't understand it, but because he understood it too well. "Is it right?" Maya asked. He nodded. "Yes," he said. And in that moment, he made a second decision. The first was silence. The second was restraint. He would not punish a child for a lie she didn't create. He would not take something from her, the way something had been taken from him. So he did what he always did. He adjusted. Maya grew up with everything Clara wanted her to have. Opportunity, exposure, confidence. Adrian never stopped it, never blocked it, never corrected it. But he never built her future either. That was the difference. Every internship Clara arranged, Adrian signed off. Every introduction Clara orchestrated, Adrian attended. Every advantage Maya received, Adrian allowed. But the core of the company, the real foundation, he never placed it in her hands. Because giving someone access is not the same as giving them ownership. Evan didn't see that at the time. All he saw was imbalance. Maya flying forward, while he stayed behind, carrying weight no one acknowledged. There was a night Evan was 20 when it finally broke through. "Why her?" he asked. Not angrily, just tired. Adrian was in the garage, hands stained with oil, fixing something that didn't need fixing. He wiped them slowly, looked at his son, and said, "Because she believes it was given to her." Evan frowned. "And me?" A pause. Longer this time. Then Adrian answered, "You know what it costs." Evan didn't respond, but something in his posture changed. Not acceptance. Not forgiveness. Understanding. Beginning. Back in the present, Maya laughed softly at something the lawyer said, her hand resting on the signed documents like they were already part of her identity. Clara watched her with quiet pride, the kind that comes from believing a plan has worked. Adrian watched too, not with affection, not with distance, something more complicated than both. Because Maya was never his enemy. She was the outcome of someone else's choices. And tonight, for the first time, she was about to face what those choices really meant. The music didn't stop. That was the strangest part. Even after the signatures, even after the shift that no one fully understood, the quartet kept playing as if nothing had changed. Because to them, nothing had. Wine glasses refilled. Conversations resumed. Laughter stitched the room back together. Clara moved easily between guests, her smile restored, her voice light again, thanking people, acknowledging congratulations, accepting admiration that felt earned. Maya stayed close to her, glowing under it all. They were already living in the future they believed they had secured. Adrian stepped away. Not abruptly, not noticeably. He simply disappeared from the center of the room. Evan saw it. Of course he did. He set his untouched drink down and followed, not directly, not urgently, just enough to keep his father in sight as he moved toward the quieter wing of the house. Past the study, past the hallway where the lights dimmed, to the old office. The door was already open. Adrian stood inside, sleeves rolled slightly, jacket off, The noise of the party reduced to a distant echo behind him. For the first time that night, he looked alone. Evan didn't speak right away. He had learned that timing mattered here. That silence wasn't empty. It was part of the conversation. "Is it done?" Evan finally asked. Not hopeful, not afraid. Just steady. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He walked to the desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a folder thick, worn at the edges, older than anything that had been signed tonight. He placed it on the desk. Then he looked at his son. "Tonight was the last step," he said. Evan's eyes moved to the folder. Something about it felt different. Not legal, not procedural. "Personnel. What is that?" he asked. Adrian rested his hand on it. Not possessive, not hesitant. Just certain. "A record," he said. A pause. Then, "Of everything I didn't say." The words settled into the room. Heavy. Quiet. Irreversible. Evan felt something shift inside him, not shock, not confusion, something deeper. Recognition. Catching up to reality. "Why now?" he asked. Adrian looked toward the doorway, where the faint glow of the party still flickered at the edges of the hall. He could hear Clara's voice in the distance, light, controlled, confident. Then he looked back at his son. "Because they think it's over." Another pause. Shorter this time. Sharper. "And people are most honest right after they believe they've won." Evan nodded slowly, not because he understood everything, but because for the first time, he understood enough. Outside, someone called Maya's name. Applause followed. A toast, maybe. Another celebration layered on top of the last. Inside the office, Adrian opened the folder. Pages filled with dates, notes, copies, signatures, patterns. 10 years of observation. 10 years of restraint. 10 years of silence. Turned into something else. Something that could not be undone. Evan stepped closer. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just ready. Because whatever this night was, it wasn't ending. It was finally beginning. Power doesn't always shift with a signature. Sometimes, it shifts when someone decides to stop pretending. The party was still alive behind them. Laughter. Glasses. Applause. A celebration built on something that no longer existed. Inside the office, Adrian turned the first page of the folder. Not rushed, not dramatic, just deliberate. "Read this," he said, sliding a document toward Evan. Evan stepped closer. The paper was older than the rest, slightly yellowed at the edges, folded once, then flattened again. A contract, dated 9 years ago. Evan scanned it, then slowed, then stopped. "This," he said quietly. "This is the original supplier agreement." Adrian nodded. "But this isn't under Veil Group," Evan continued, his voice tightening slightly. He looked up. "It's under a different entity." Adrian didn't smile. He never did in moments like this. "It always was," he said. Evan blinked. "No," he said instinctively. "We've always operated through." He stopped himself, looked back at the document, looked closer this time, not at the title, at the ownership clause. Adrian Vale Holdings. Not the company Clara had just taken control of. Something older, something deeper. Evan felt it then. No shock, not anger. A shift in understanding. "All of them?" he asked. Adrian turned another page, then another. Contract after contract. Lease agreements, licensing rights, equipment ownership. Every piece that made the business function was never where it appeared to be. "The company they have," Adrian said quietly, "is the structure." A pause. "This is the substance." Evan exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Recognition. "How long?" he asked. Adrian didn't hesitate. "Long enough." Outside, applause broke again, louder this time. Maya's voice rose above it, thanking people, confident, proud, stepping fully into a role she believed she now owned. Inside, Evan placed his hand on the stack of documents, felt the weight of them, not just paper. "Years. You let her believe it was hers," he said. Adrian nodded once, Yes. Evan looked at him. There was no anger in his expression now, just something quieter, more precise. Why didn't you stop her earlier? Adrian met his eyes, held them. Because taking something away too soon, he said, voice low, even. Teaches nothing. Silence settled between them. Not empty, not uncertain, complete. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside, the truth had already moved on. Evan closed the folder slowly, not because he was done reading, but because he understood what it meant. For the first time in his life, something that belonged to him had never actually been taken. Adrian stepped back from the desk, not claiming anything, not announcing anything, just letting the realization exist. Because the first thing he took back tonight wasn't the company. It was control over what the truth would mean, and when it would arrive. Clara had always believed she understood her husband. That was her first mistake. From across the room, she watched Adrian through the reflection of a glass panel just long enough to confirm what she already assumed. He was calm, predictable, still playing the same role he had for years. That was how she had built everything, on the certainty that Adrian Vale would never create a scene, never challenge her in public, never disrupt the image she had spent decades perfecting. And tonight, he hadn't. He had signed the papers, said the words, raised the glass. Exactly as expected, Clara allowed herself a small, internal release. Not visible, never visible, because control isn't just about what you do. It's about what you believe no one else will do. Everything's finalized, the lawyer said beside her, voice low, professional. Clara nodded, her fingers brushing lightly over the documents as if they were already part of her. And the holdings? She asked. All under the structure you outlined, he replied. She smiled. Of course they were. She had spent years building that structure carefully, patiently, without drawing attention. Small transfers, layered ownership, accounts that shifted just enough to avoid notice. Nothing illegal, just strategic. She had told herself that more than once, because in her mind, this wasn't theft. It was correction. Evan had never needed the company. He had always been capable, strong, resilient, the kind of person who would survive without help. Maya needed protection, positioning, a future that wouldn't depend on chance. Clara lifted her glass slightly, watching her daughter laugh with a group of guests, radiant under attention that felt completely natural to her. That future had been built, secured, protected. At least, that's what Clara believed. Mom? Maya said softly, stepping closer. There's someone I want you to meet. Clara turned, her expression softening instantly. Of course, she said, her voice warm again. As they moved through the crowd, Clara glanced once more toward the hallway, toward the part of the house where Adrian had gone. For a brief moment, something didn't sit right. Not fear, not doubt, just a small misalignment, like a detail that didn't match the rest of the picture. But it passed, because it always had. Adrian had never been unpredictable, never complicated, never dangerous. He was manageable. Clara smiled again, fully now, as another guest approached to congratulate her. She accepted it with ease, with grace, with the quiet confidence of someone who believed. The hardest part was over, and somewhere, not far from the noise and the light, Adrian closed the folder in his office. Not quickly, not forcefully, just enough to mark a transition, because the man Clara thought she knew was the version of him she had needed to believe in, the real one she had never met. The party didn't end with a crash. It ended with laughter, fading into distance. Cars pulled away one by one. Voices softened. Lights dimmed. And then silence returned to the house that had just celebrated something that no longer existed. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, one hand resting on the counter, the other holding her phone. She wasn't nervous. Not yet. She scrolled through messages, congratulations, confirmations, follow-ups. Everything aligned. Everything. Exactly as planned. Then the phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. But something small, instinctive made her answer. Hello? A pause. Then a voice. Measured. Professional. Mrs. Vale, this is Daniel Mercer, Senior Compliance Officer with First Dominion Bank. Clara straightened slightly. Is there an issue? Another pause. Longer this time. Yes, ma'am, the voice said. There is. Something shifted. Not visibly, but internally. A line. Just slightly out of place. I'm calling regarding a series of ownership transfers tied to the Vale Group accounts, he continued. We've encountered inconsistencies. Clara's grip tightened around the phone. Inconsistencies? She repeated. Her voice was still steady, but no longer warm. Yes, ma'am. Several core assets referenced in your recent filings don't appear to be held under the entity you now control. Silence. That's not possible, Clara said. Not defensive. Certain. That's what we believed as well, the man replied, until we completed a deeper review. Clara turned slightly, looking out into the darkened hallway, toward the office. Closed now. What exactly are you saying? She asked. Another pause. Deliberate. I'm saying, Mrs. Vale. The company you've assumed control of does not currently possess the operational assets required to function at its previous capacity. The words didn't land all at once. They settled. Slowly. That's not correct, Clara said again. But this time, there was something behind it. Not anger. Not fear. Disbelief. We flagged the matter for further review. The voice continued. You'll likely be contacted again within 48 hours. The call ended. Clara didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe properly. She stared at the dark reflection in the kitchen window, at the version of herself that had walked into this night believing everything was secured, and for the first time, something didn't make sense. Not a small misalignment, not a detail to ignore, something fundamental. Her eyes moved slowly, back toward the hallway, toward the closed office door, and in that moment, Clara realized something she had never considered before. Adrian hadn't resisted her. He hadn't fought. He hadn't even questioned her, because he didn't need to. He had already moved everything that mattered, somewhere she couldn't see. The hallway felt longer than it had an hour ago, quieter, colder. Clara walked it slowly, not because she was afraid, but because something inside her was trying to catch up with a reality it hadn't prepared for. The office door was closed. It was never closed. Adrian had always left it open, an unspoken signal that nothing inside required hiding. Tonight, it did. Clara reached for the handle, paused, just for a second, then turned it. The room was dim, lit only by a desk lamp. Adrian stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, looking out into the dark yard as if the night itself had more to say than anyone in the house. He didn't turn around. You should knock, he said quietly. Clara stepped inside anyway. Closed the door behind her. There's a problem, she said. Direct, controlled. No pretense now. Adrian nodded slightly. Mem? That wasn't a question, she added, her voice tightening just enough to reveal something underneath. Now he turned. Slowly, looked at her. Not with anger, not with surprise. Recognition. Yes, he said. There is. Clara held his gaze. You moved the assets. Not an accusation. A conclusion. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He walked to the desk, rested his hand on the closed folder. You signed everything, Clara continued. You approved the transfer. You sat there tonight and... I did, Adrian said. Calm. Even. Clara took a step closer. Then explained to me how I now control a company that can't operate. A pause. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. 10 years compressed into silence. Then he said, because you were never meant to control it. The words didn't hit like a shout. They landed like certainty. Clara's expression didn't collapse. It hardened. You think this is clever? She asked, her voice dropping. You think moving things around changes what this is? Adrian tilted his head slightly. What is it? Clara didn't hesitate. It's mine. The word hung in the air. Heavy. Revealing more than she intended. Adrian nodded once, as if confirming something he had already known. No, he said quietly. A beat. It never was. Silence. Not empty. Not fragile. Final. Clara took another step forward. Closer now. No distance left to hide behind. You let me believe it was, she said. Adrian met her eyes. Didn't look away. Yes. No apology. No explanation. Just truth. Clara searched his face for anger, for regret, for something she could push against. There was nothing there. That was what unsettled her. You think this ends here? She asked. Adrian didn't move. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't even blink. No, he said. It ends exactly where you took it. Clara frowned. Just slightly. For the first time, she didn't understand him. And that, more than anything, was the beginning of something she could no longer control. Control doesn't disappear all at once. It fractures, quietly, before it breaks. Clara felt it now. Not in the room. In herself. You think moving assets changes anything? She said, voice lower now, sharper. I built this with you. Adrian didn't interrupt. He never did. I managed the accounts. I handled the investors. I made this company grow, Clara continued. Her words came faster now, not louder, but tighter. More defensive than she intended. Adrian listened, then asked a single question. Did you? It wasn't mocking. It wasn't dismissive. It was precise. Clara's jaw tightened. You know I did. Adrian nodded slowly. As long as it served you. Silence. The air shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. Clara stepped closer to the desk. Her eyes dropped just for a second, to the folder beneath Adrian's hand. That's what this is about, she asked. Old suspicions? Old stories you never had the courage to confront? Adrian didn't react, but something behind his eyes settled. Courage, he repeated. Then, without another word, he opened the folder. Not quickly, not forcefully, deliberately. He turned it, so she could see. The first page was a photograph, black and white, grainy at the edges, but clear enough. Clara froze. Not visibly, but completely. Adrian watched her, not her face. Her eyes, because eyes don't lie the way people do. This was 10 years ago, he said. Quiet, measured. Clara didn't speak. The man in the photo stood beside her, close, familiar, his hand resting where it shouldn't. Adrian turned the page. A document, clinical, cold. Now DNA results. Clara inhaled, shallow, controlled, but not enough to hide it. Don't, she said. Soft. Do soft. Adrian didn't stop. Marcus Hale, he said. The name landed harder than anything else. Clara closed her eyes. Just for a second. When she opened them, the control was still there, but thinner now. You went through my things, she said. Adrian shook his head once. No. A pause. I paid attention. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Clara straightened slightly. Rebuilding. Reframing. You don't understand what that was, she said. Adrian didn't respond. You don't understand what I had to do, she added. Another pause. This time, Adrian stepped forward. Just once. Close enough that there was no distance left to perform. No, he said. A breath. Then, I understand exactly what you did. Clara's composure didn't collapse. It shifted. From control to calculation. Then you understand why, she said. Adrian held her chaise. Unmoved. No, he said again. I understand that you had a choice. The words cut deeper than anger ever could. Clara looked at him. Really looked this time. As if trying to find the version of him she had always known. And failing. Because the man standing in front of her now was not the one she had built her plans around. He was quieter. Colder. And finally, impossible to predict. Some truths don't destroy you when you hear them. They rearrange everything you thought you understood. Evan hadn't meant to listen, but the office door wasn't fully closed. At first, it was just voices. Low, controlled, measured. The kind of conversation that didn't belong in the open. Then, a name, Marcus Hale. Even still. Not moved closer. Not stepped away. Just stopped. He didn't need to hear everything. Only enough. A photograph. A test. A silence that had lasted longer than he realized. And suddenly, things that had never made sense did. The difference. The distance. The way his mother had always looked at him. Not with anger. Not even with disappointment. With something else. Something closer to resentment. Evan leaned back against the wall. The hallway felt narrower now. The air heavier. He thought about every dinner. Every introduction. Every time Clara had said, "Our future," and meant someone else. Inside the office, voices lowered again. Too quiet now to make out words. But Evan didn't need them anymore. Because the truth wasn't in the details. It was in the pattern. 10 years of it. Maybe more. He closed his eyes briefly. Not to escape. Not to Denny. To accept. Then, he straightened. Opened the door. Neither of them turned immediately. Adrian still standing by the desk. Clara facing him. Evan stepped inside. Closed the door behind him. Now they looked at him. Clara first. A flicker of something, fear, calculation, crossed her face before it settled back into control. "Evan," she said, her voice almost normal. "This isn't..." He didn't let her finish. "How long?" he asked. Not angry. Not loud. Precisi. Clara opened her mouth, then stopped. Because there was no version of the truth that could be shaped into something softer. Adrian answered instead. 10 years, he said. Evan nodded once. Slow. Measured. He didn't look at his father. Not yet. His eyes stayed on Clara. "So all of it," he said quietly. Not a question. Clara took a step forward. "Evan, you don't understand." This time, he stopped her. "Don't," he said. "One word." Enough. Silence filled the room again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one belonged to him. Evan finally turned to Adrian. Their eyes met. For years he had wondered why his father never stepped in. Never defended. Never corrected. No. He saw it. Not absence. Timing. Evan exhaled slowly. Then said, "What happens now?" Not to Clara. Not to the situation. To his father. Because for the first time, he wasn't asking for protection. He was asking for direction. And Adrian, who had said nothing for so long, finally had something ready to give. There's a moment in every collapse when the noise stops, not because the damage is done, but because the truth has finally arrived. Evan's question still hung in the air. What happens now? Clara looked between them. For the first time, she wasn't leading the conversation. She wasn't shaping it. She was inside it. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He closed the folder, not hiding it, not protecting it, finalizing it. Then he spoke. "Now," he said calmly, "everything continues, exactly as it should." Clara frowned. "That's not an answer." Adrian met her eyes. "It is." Silence. Then, he reached into the folder again, pulled out a second set of documents. Thicker, narrower. He placed them on the desk, turned them toward Clara. "You wanted control," he said. A pause. "You have it." Clara didn't move, didn't reach for them. "You control the company," Adrian continued. "The accounts, the liabilities, the obligations tied to its name." Her eyes dropped to the pages, scanning. Faster now. The numbers didn't match what she expected. The structure wasn't what she remembered. Debt. Not massive, but precise. Strategic. Enough to matter. "Where are the primary contracts?" she asked. Adrian didn't answer. "Where are the licensing rights?" she pressed. Still, all nothing. Clara looked up, and this time, she understood. "You moved them," she said. Adrian shook his head once. "No." A beat. "I left them where they've always been." Clara's composure cracked. Not visibly, but structurally. "Under what?" she demanded. Adrian turned his gaze slightly. Toward Evan. Just enough. Evan didn't react. Didn't step forward. Didn't claim anything. But the implication was already there. Clara followed that look. Back to Adrian. "You gave it to him?" she asked. Her voice didn't rise, but something inside it did. Adrian answered without hesitation. No. A pause. Then he built it. The room went still, not because of the words, but because of what they corrected. Years of narrative, years of dismissal, years of being told who mattered and who didn't. Evan said nothing. He didn't need to, because for the first time, the truth didn't require defense. Clara looked at him, really looked, and saw something she had ignored for years. Not weakness, not absence. Foundation. Her lips parted slightly, as if to say something, to reclaim something, to reshape something. But nothing came, because there was nothing left to shape. Everything she had built her certainty on had already been moved, quietly, carefully, irreversibly. Adrian stepped back, not claiming victory, not demanding recognition, just stepping out of the way, because the moment didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to the truth, and the truth had finally landed exactly where it was meant to. No one shouted, no one broke anything, and somehow that made it heavier. Clara stood there, unmoving, not defeated, not yet, but no longer in control of the story she had been telling for years. She looked at Evan, then at Adrian, then back at the documents that had quietly dismantled everything she believed she owned. I did this for her, she said finally, soft, not defensive, almost pleading. No one answered, because for the first time, the justification sounded exactly like what it was, a choice. Evan exhaled slowly, not angry, not bitter. Clear. You didn't do it for her, he said. Clara looked at him. You did it because you thought I wouldn't fight back. The words didn't hit like an accusation. They landed like truth. Clara's lips parted, but nothing came out, because there was no version of this moment she had prepared for. Adrian stepped toward the door, paused, then looked back once, not at Clara, at Evan. A small nod. Not permission, not instruction, recognition. Evan understood. He didn't chase victory, didn't demand apology, didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped forward, closed the folder, and said, "We're done here." 3 words. No anger, no drama. Final. Clara didn't stop him, didn't follow, didn't argue, because for the first time in her life, silence was no longer something she controlled. It was something she had been left with. Evan walked out of the office. Adrian followed. The hallway felt different now, lighter, not because anything had been fixed, but because nothing was hidden anymore. Outside, the night air was cold, clean, real. Evan stepped onto the driveway, stopped, looked up. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked. Adrian stood beside him, hands in his pockets, eyes forward. A long pause. Then, "Because you weren't ready to hear it." Another beat. "And I wasn't ready to let you carry it." Evan nodded slowly. Not agreement, not forgiveness, understanding. And that was enough. They stood there for a while. No more questions, no more explanations, just quiet, real quiet. The kind that doesn't hide anything, the kind that comes after everything has already been said. If this story made you feel something, pause for a second. Think about the quiet people in your life, the ones who never argue, never explain, but never forget. Because not every battle is loud, not every victory needs to be seen. Some of the most powerful endings arrive in silence. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or quietly pushed aside, drop 1 word below that describes how it felt. Like the video if this story stayed with you. Subscribe for more stories where silence speaks louder than words. I'll see you in the next story.